Oh, I think it is right now.
Yep.
Maybe.
Yep. Yep. It
Okay.
says it is on mine.
Oh, I paused it because I didn't want just garbage on there. So that's what I get for trying to save time, I guess. But
I wasn't sure if you'd be able to log in because I noticed it was specific
I
time
saw
for.
that too. I actually checked in at 6 o'clock our time, just to make sure.
was
Oh,
did
yeah.
anybody else have trouble with that when they were setting up their meetings or?
Mm-mm.
Oh,
I've had one other person, so you're not the only one, Chad.
okay. Now I don't feel so bad, but. And thank you for your quick response on how to fix it, Professor Harms. I don't, it was confusing to me, but we got it set, so we're good. So are we just supposed to discuss what we found here or?
Yep. Maybe
Okay.
starting with the far left column, and you can decide if you want to popcorn or you want to go in the order. It's up to you.
You guys okay with just going in order like we've done before?
Yeah, we have a lot to get through, so we should
Yep.
kind of stick to a structure.
What are the three approaches mentioned in the chapter to confirm that students are learning during the lecture? Holly.
All right. So I have eye contact, walking around the room. Just that simple. Oops, sorry, I moved my screen there. Just that simple presence of being there and making sure, oh, she's walking by, I better get off my phone, better do this, do that. That seems to be like one of the most effective for me is just that constant, like, I'm not going to let you daydream. I'm not going to let you fall off, whatever you're doing here. Next I have repetition, breaking down material. Making sure the students know the why. What's the goal for today? What's the end result? What are we aiming towards? So how do I know when we get there for the day? When have we met our goal? And then breakouts and reflections I have third. Parking lot for feedback. So sometimes I'll have students just write on a sticky note their questions and just throw it up there. They don't have to put their name on it, or even just comments about the class. What did they like? What did they not like? Just to get that quick reflection and kind of see where they're at. Also that process time too when they have reflection time.
Holly, do you end up posting learning objectives for number 2, or how do you end up trying to keep students informed of what's the purpose?
Yep, so we're really big with learning targets at our school, and so we have them for math. We normally have them at the beginning of every note, so we go through them, and then I usually post it again at the end when they have their assignment. I'll just copy and paste it over there just as a reminder. So,
Amy?
Try to get on a personal level to some sort with the kids and let them know, create examples of comparing, I don't know, when we're doing proportions, pick a couple students and do an example of their height to their shoe size or something strange like that. Just try to get them involved in the lesson as we can. Maintain the eye contact, just look around the room. You can tell a lot by looking at people's faces. Are they getting it? Are they not? And just make it an environment where they can feel comfortable asking questions. Sometimes they kind of stump me. They're like, well, what about if you did this? And I'll step back and I'll like, well, let me think, and stuff like that. And I think if they see me think, and it kind of gets them into good conversations too.
I guess I'm next. I think Holly, you had said something about like taking or kind of chunking, taking pauses, trying not to rush through everything. I know when I was first a teacher, it was you had to hurry up and get through this perfect lesson plan that you had developed. But now through the years, I've realized that less is more. And what I've struggled with in the past, and now this year, the curriculum we have, it's completely centered around student conversation about math. Have the kids talk about what they do and their differences. And then the idea of having students summarize what they've learned or remember about the day without looking back at what they have to see if they actually have a recall. I got kind of lengthy here, but I did like the idea of using the margins to write down questions. Use the free space they have. You don't have to fit everything within those 2 blue lines. So, Tanner?
Yeah, I didn't put this on my thing, but you guys talk about chunking. And that's something that I think is just hopefully natural to most people, but you're right about the first time teachers trying to fly through everything. I compare and contrast. I like to compare like how things might be similar to something we've worked on in the past or how they're different. I don't know. I forget I'm blanking on the name. Venn diagrams are very helpful, and students love to fill those things in. And one thing I've done is not shut down incorrect comparisons, but rather I'll just throw up everything. And then almost immediately students will agree or disagree, and they'll have to explain why, which is good. So that gets them involved. In that video with that professor from Stanford, he talks about how he had this he thought was an amazing argument for a lecture. He goes in and then immediately gets shut down, and how somebody described how he had a mistake in his argument. And he said that was actually very important for the students to see that even I make mistakes. And I was like, that's good, because a lot of times I do make mistakes, or when I was an early teacher, I would make mistakes and get really like sweaty, like I'd worry. And to make them feel a little bit more natural too, because I purposely make mistakes sometimes and it doesn't feel right. It just feels like I'm forcing it out, and the students kind of pick up on that. So, and then like you guys already mentioned, kind of just walking around the room. I have whiteboards all over my room, and I tend to just use the one. I should probably use all of them, move around, have students go up to them at times, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All the way back up. The strategies for taking notes. What did you have, Holly?
I do expect students to take notes. I don't assess them. I've never done like a notebook collection. Mostly because it's just seems very tedious for me to another thing to handle. But I do let them choose how they take notes, and I try and give them different strategies. One thing in AVID, the class that I have, they're really big on, they used to be super focused on Cornell notes, and now it's more so focused note taking. So there's not just one right way to do it, but whatever works for that student. And the notes are always the first place that I tell kids to look if they have a question. I say, hey, did you look at the notes? Oh, I was gone, or I didn't take notes. Okay, look at the notes on Schoology that I posted, and just kind of forcing them to look and search for it, because they'll remember it better that way. And then they get used to it, and they won't ask me until they've looked. And so that's kind of a nice point to get to when they figure out I've got to use my resources first and then go from there. So, and then I do like to have kids go through and highlight, circle, whatever, mark up the notes on or what stands out for them, what they find most useful, or even what they still have questions on. But just to use the notes as more than just a one-time thing. Sorry, I'm still at school. My phone is ringing. We'll just let it ring. It'll go to voicemail.
Amy?
I'm kind of the same way. I don't grade my notes. I don't have them hand them in or anything like that. I expect them to take them. Most of them do. The vocab formulas, I want them to write that down. Some of them do, some of them don't. I post my notes in Schoology, kind of like you do. I used to use Shutterfly to post the notes. And some are really good about using colored pens and highlighters and stuff as they take their notes. I have one student that actually tries to take math notes on his computer. And I'm like, okay, Surya, if it works for you, go for it. It would be nice if they could take 5 to 10 minutes when they're done taking notes to go through and reflect over them. But in a 45-minute class period, I find I don't have a lot of that time to kind of let them digest their notes. They get done with my class, they have a 4-minute break time, and they go right on to the next class. So I think it's a little bit different in the high school situation than in a college where they might have a little bit more time. I use previous notes, I guess. We tried Cornell notes in our ramp up, but I had younger kids, and they're like, I don't get it. I don't get how to use them. And so it's like, well, how do you take notes? Well, this is how I do. And I'm like, okay, well, that's just another way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
A common thread. I don't assess the notes in any way. I actually let them use them on any tests that we have. Kind of a catch-22. I know in years past I never wanted to because there was always good examples in there. But what I've found now with this new curriculum, their test questions are better, so they aren't just, the same problem as some of the examples just change numbers. It's developing the context and how to use the concept rather than just regurgitating numbers. What I've found, at least in the school I'm at right now, is students really don't know how to take notes. In a sense, they're almost used to just hand me out a piece of paper and I'll fill in the blanks and that's all I have to do. And it's kind of a learning curve. It's something we're struggling with in the math department, is how to get kids to write their thoughts down in a better way. But Tanner?
I don't want to come. I don't know. I don't like notes. This is more of a personal take on it. Because I've been introduced to the Cornell strategy. I've looked at several other strategies. I was never a note taker as a student. I can't, if I'm taking down notes, I feel like I fall behind in the lecture, or I fall behind in whatever we're doing in the classroom, what I'm supposed to be taking notes on. So I've always just, when I was a student, would just follow along in a textbook because I was always handed a textbook for the class. And usually the lecture followed some kind of, like, we're doing this section on this day. I could pretty much just follow along in the book. And that worked very well for me as a student. As a teacher, I don't require them, but I do have conversations about how, later on, and you're probably going to be expected to be taking notes. Some people might even see it rude if you're not. And not always will you have a textbook to guide you. Like, for example, I say all that, but I don't have a textbook in my classroom. I make all my own curriculum. I work at the board sometimes. We do lectures sometimes. But if I ever do have assessments, I say open notebook, unless specifically told I cannot do otherwise. Just because I don't force it on them. And I don't teach it either. So I'm probably not the best at it. Something I could improve on.
I agree with you on that too. If I'm focusing on taking notes, I sometimes miss out on some of the important stuff. So.
I just feel like I'm playing catch up and not being able to digest the I don't know, the lecture.
No, I'd argue though that not only is note-taking jotting down, but it's also writing questions or summarizing other ways that you can process and retain that information better than just listening.
And I will do that. I almost always have like a thoughts box. Like, I'll just put down my thoughts on something, like, oh, this looks like that, or very similar to this. Why not? Or just do, like, I'll write out the steps that I see in my head for like an algorithm through the problem, even though we weren't talking about one. I'll write things down like that. And that's something I hold true in my classroom. Like, I'll have a thoughts area on the board where we're just writing down thoughts that come to our head.
I switched over to tables this year, and I actually let students write on them with dry erase markers. So, kind of like the parking lot idea, or they can do examples on there and then write other things in their notebooks. So creates a little bit of a mess, and they don't necessarily always agree with writing on tables, but they're okay with it.
Sounds fun.
It is. I stole it from one of my science teachers. So
do you ever find that students start relying on just their notes if they're used during assessments, or do they usually use them pretty productively?
It depends upon how they've done them. If they are organized so they can go through them, I've found that those students usually don't rely on them as much because they've taken the time ahead of time, and some of them have rewritten things, highlighted, like you guys have said, and they seem to recall it maybe just from seeing a certain page in their notebook. I do have other students that don't prepare for the assessments ahead of time, and then they're paging through everything trying to figure out what they need to do.
Right.
So, like I said, it's a catch-22.
The preparation.
Yep. So, I
know some of your classmates have mentioned that taking notes is one way for them to try to stress. They don't want them to memorize equations that might be given on the MCA, but to be able to utilize those, and notes allow them to take the information that oftentimes might be provided and be able to build on it so they don't make a mistake that's going to domino all the way through the problem.
Mm-hmm.
It can take a big load off the shoulders because you don't have to stress memorizing, like you said. Something I always appreciated.
Yeah.
Or what I've tried to stress too, write down your steps. And then if you get the wrong answer, now we don't have to start over from scratch. You can just kind of walk through, have them look through it, and find where you made your error instead of starting over.
Yeah. And I hate it when kids, they'll come up, I don't get it. And I'm trying to read and they erased everything. And it's kind of like, why did you erase it? You might have been on the right track. And a lot of times they are. It's one little mistake of they wrote a minus instead of a plus. And it's like, just leave it there. We'll work through it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So do you guys view taking notes in different from, like, would you guys consider doing your practice in a notebook and like keeping it in the notebook as part of like note taking, as long as you're like keeping thoughts and examples in your note, essentially?
That's what I have them do. They don't hand in their homework to me at all. They keep everything in a notebook. So they can, have their examples right above their assignment. They can continue and not just have pages. With some of my younger kids, it's a little bit more of an organizational nightmare. But for some of them, they keep their examples there. They do write, they'll just randomly put the Pythagorean theorem down because they know that they need it today, even though it was 4 pages back. And yeah, I found it's a little bit easier if they do keep everything in one notebook. But
yeah.
And I have them keep a binder where they have all their notes and their assignments, and I hand back their assignments every couple, 3-4 days. And they're like, do we need to keep them? I'm like, well, make sure the grades are in there, and they might be a good resource to use to study from, but some of them do and some of them don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
okay. What about if over half the class fails?
Oof.
All right.
Just
First
had
thing-
that.
Is it too fresh for you, Tanner?
Yeah.
So I normally will do a little self-assessment first. Like, do I feel like I gave them the tools that they would need to be successful? And then also having them self-assess. I actually had a not great quiz in pre-calc this last week, and it's kind of one of those things where, okay, it's done, it's said and done, but what can we learn from it? And think about what you did to prepare. What could you have done better? What kind of tripped you up? What problems did you struggle on? So we kind of had a conversation about, hey, it is what it is. I know some of you who are perfectionists are not going to enjoy this, but it's better to learn now, to learn from your mistakes, than it is never having struggled and then hitting the real world and really struggling and not knowing how to handle it. So try to use it as a teaching opportunity, as well as don't make the same mistake again kind of thing. What can you do to improve? So.
Amy?
I'm kind of the same way. First, reflect, what did I teach? How did I teach it? Did I cover everything in enough detail? Lately, with all of the snow days and early outs and late starts, it's kind of like, where am I? And the kids are asking, what have we been learning? And so when you do the assessment, then it's kind of like, okay, what have I taught them? Or, did I explain it different ways? I do allow my kids to go back and make corrections to their assignments, or not, well, their assignments, but also their tests and quizzes. But when they make the corrections to their tests and quizzes, they have to tell me what they did wrong, what they would need to do to fix it, and then actually fix it. So it's kind of like they have to have the 2-part thing of kind of like, okay, I see where my mistake was. This is what I should have done instead. And it kind of is that self-assessment a little bit. Then get help from myself when they do that, or a para, or even another student. Sometimes if my peer can explain it to me in terms that I understand, it's a little bit beneficial, maybe. So.
Yeah. the whole self-assessment thing kind of comes up. I have not had this happen in a couple of years, thank goodness, but I did like the idea of having a brainstorm before the exam, like before the next one, like what the important topics were, and rank them. And the idea of having them go back, like you said, Amy, and say, okay, this is what I did wrong. This is what I should have done. And now here's my answer. The whole, coming full circle with it. And then, like, I don't know if it's Holly or Amy, you said it too, discussing it with somebody. Okay, why do you think I did this wrong? I think all of those are valuable for them to understand. It's a tough thing. I mean, I look at it first, it's like you said, what did I do wrong as a teacher? Did we miss too many days? Did we have early outs? I mean, I guess I kind of point the finger at myself first until I fully look at everything.
One second. I keep hearing myself. Is anybody else having that?
A little bit, but.
Mm-mm.
Okay. Anyways, whenever, like recently, one of my classes did not, 50% of them didn't fail, but it was still low. It was like, we had 60% passed it or something like that, a little higher. But I've noticed a trend in my classes that it happens mostly when I focus on mechanical over really diving into what the concept is. So I do experience that. It is a very self-critical time for me. And I tell the students that too. But at the same time, I say, we have that conversation just like the text. It's just like, there is things you guys could have been doing as well. It's equal. It's on all of us. It's not just a teacher versus student kind of thing. I do the post quiz and test reflection piece. I've never done. I like the correction thing. I've done that and I still do that, but just having them reflect on why their score was what it was is something I haven't done. And I would like to try in the future. Just, not just like all right, here's your score. Think to yourself why you got it. That would be I don't think that would go over so well in the classroom. I do think it would be better when they're making their corrections to give also like a personal reason as to why that happened. And not just to always have the cop out of, it was an off day for me. I just wasn't feeling great. I was sick. Just, what could you have done differently? Should you have studied a bit more? Should you have asked different questions in the classroom? Things like that. Should you have worked with different peers during practice time? Something, just simple things like that they should answer. Mm-hmm. I liked that part of the text a lot.
Yeah, and when they do that, I try to give them incentive in terms of points or whatever it might be for not so much what you say, but how much you say and how you say it and how truthful that you are. Like, so
I'll be honest, it's already hard enough to grade corrections, but then to also have to read back through their personal reflections would be a bit, but hopefully it would be worthwhile. It's something I want to try.
Yeah.
I think the chapter 6 different options too that include having them try to identify what kind of mistake did they make. Was it computational? Was it conceptual? They really didn't know what was going on, is helpful for them to better tune in to saying, well, maybe I really do need to get some extra help on this, because it's not just a simple, I didn't transpose that number correctly, but I really started off on the wrong path.
Mm-hmm. That domino effect you brought up earlier is a big one that gets students a lot, so just simple things like that to reflect on.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Last but not least here.
What did we notice about the research findings? How would you use this information to prepare for calculus and further math?
Okay, so I kind of just did some bullet points from each of the articles. So my first one was in 2001, the study that found the most important factor in the success was how much was taken in high school. And I also liked how they said that the background in calculus from high school not only impacts their math classes, but their other science-based STEM classes as well, with the physics, chemistry, and biology. Just a few, performance in your early classes was a consistent predictor of success later on. Benefit of taking calculus when they reach a college level. And there was somewhere else, I think maybe in the next article, that ties into this, where it's even if a student wasn't super successful in calculus in high school, it still proved to be beneficial for them to get some sort of exposure to it, some sort of background with it when they did reach their calculus class in college, because then they had that to build off of. So even if they struggled in the high school, they still got exposed to it and they still had something to work off of. And then I thought it was interesting how they talked about the spiral approach, and then the, how did they word the other one? I don't remember. Hierarchy, maybe? I don't remember. But they talked about the...
that was the more traditional one, wasn't it?
Yeah, like the more traditional versus the spiral, and how the spiral... that's where it was when you took high school and calculus in high school, and then it reinforced it in college. So, and then some from the role of calculus, kind of towards the beginning where it talked about factors for those who take calculus, I thought was kind of an interesting thing, where maybe it wasn't surprising, but it was kind of interesting to point out what class you were in ninth grade might dictate how far you go, the knowledge that you have by that point, and then race, socioeconomic status, and then the all-important self-efficacy, that sense of, am I a math person or not a math person? If you scroll down a little bit, let's see what else I've got. I thought it was interesting that they pointed out that it was a really small percentage of students who were accelerated in high school that actually continued that path on into college, where it makes you think that in high school it's more so, oh, this is comes easy for me, so I'm just going to be accelerated and I'm not going to maybe put a whole lot of effort in, which for some of my kids in pre-calc, that's the point that they reach where they struggle. And so I always have to give them that little speech of everyone who math comes easier for will kind of always hit a roadblock at some point in time, and it can be frustrating, and you have to figure out, I've never had to work at this before and now I have to. And that can be how college is. I've never had to work before and now I have to, and I don't know what to do. So, and then I would use this information just, I think, to have conversations with students and stress to them the importance of the understanding and not just the powering through to say that you did it, to say that you took AP Calc because it looks good on your transcript. I know they talked about that in a lot of the articles as well. And then I read Amy's beforehand, and I liked how she talked about having a recent grad come in and have that relatable, there we go, that relatable person come in and talk, as opposed to just hearing it all from the teacher. So hopefully that wasn't too windy, sorry. There's a lot going on in those articles.
Oh yeah, there was a lot in there. Kind of idea, I try to have that strong foundation to see success in calculus. I always tell them, well, I always told my AP Calc kids, if you don't pass the test, it's okay. Because if you take it in college, you've at least been exposed to it once, you'll hear it again, kind of that spiral effect. Some states and districts require 4 courses of math in high school to build up that prior knowledge. We in our district only require 3 math credits to graduate from our high school. We encourage 4, but it doesn't always happen. The spiral curriculum. Sometimes the high school math classes move at a slower pace. Let's see here, if you have the entire year to teach material. Oh, like our college pre-calc class, we have the entire year to teach it, but at the college level, it's only a semester, and how I can take a little bit more time at the high school than they do at the college, and just kind of letting them know some of those differences. Differences between taking it in high school and college. If I fail, I can't retake it. Okay, you don't always get those retakes like you do in high school. Time allotments to complete work. When that 50 minutes is done, you're done with your test, whether you're done or not. And then having the recent grad come back. We've done that as like a whole grade level. We've had some former students come back and talk about their college experience, not necessarily a math class, but I think it'd be kind of interesting to have some kids that have taken math classes come back and talk about what have you learned, what was different, the same. It was kind of eye-opening. I had my mentor teacher come in last year and observe me, and then she also answered questions that the kids had, and they had a lot of good questions for her. So I thought it was kind of good. She reinforced what I had kind of told them already, but also answered more of the questions. I'm like, okay, now that's something new I can tell them next year. But I think kind of hearing it from an outside source kind of helps that. It's not just me being Mrs. Larson.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, being in a smaller school, the idea of having algebra before ninth grade, in years past at the school I'm at now, they split. They didn't like to say tracking, but they basically tracked the eighth grade and they split them. Some went into Algebra 1 and some went into just like eighth grade math. They call it applied algebra. What we realized is it was basically the same course. So why split them? One book might talk about solving equations in chapter 2. One might start in chapter 6. And we said the material is identical. We also found out that by doing that, a lot of students got that, oh, I'm in the dumb class mentality, even though it was the same material. But one of the big things in our school is we don't have enough staff and we don't have enough students to offer all of these other courses. Like my first year here, I taught AP Calc. I had 4 kids. And the next year it was going to be 2. So the district said nope. So we shuffled some classes around, and we only have 2 math teachers at the high school. So that's what we struggle with, is trying to fit it into their schedules. And one thing that I've noticed in my years, that it seems like some kids are being pressured to take these higher level classes because of peer pressure, whether it's from their parents or friends, whether or not they're ready for it or not. And then we need to reassure them that if they don't take calculus in high school, it's not a problem. Like you guys have said that, oh, well, what if they don't pass the test? Well, it's the exposure to it. If we can throw in enough to get that good foundation ready for them, they should have success in calculus in college if that's the path that they take. So sorry, I got a little long-winded too, but.
How much? Do I have time to get long-winded?
Oh yeah.
Well,
Anytime you want, Tanner.
Just wondering, because I don't remember the time limit on these things.
Actually, I just got a deal that they removed the 40-minute time limit. So.
Oh, sweet.
Oh, don't tell him that. Jeez.
Now they made it 42.
So I think it was a couple weeks ago, I mentioned that 1%, like in the conversations with this person at MDE, they mentioned that 1% of high school seniors are conceptually ready for calculus at that age. And the statistics in that first article, I forget the name of it, but were basically they weren't as low as 1%, but it was dang near. And it kind of solidified, like, I do think a lot of students are pushed very fast to get there. Our school also does the 3-year math credits to graduate. And that's also like our requirement to get into calculus, which is on the lower side, because I know a lot of students would probably benefit from going to like a college algebra first and then into that. But that's not necessarily what the question is about. I do think that this like tracking is detrimental, I think it was Holly mentioned that the math versus math. I remember I just remember how I was as a student with tracking, and I've seen it at our school, and this is our second year now without tracking, and I've already seen the positives in the regular classroom to have every student in there, and it's just I think taking algebra, like the high school topics, at a slower rate, while not necessarily all of them are related to calculus, it just drives home you need to be conceptual ready. Like, you need to understand concepts of a lot of algebra to be able to succeed in calculus, even geometry. There's a lot of topics that meld into it. So I think a lot of students can get into calculus, and then they'll be working on differentiation, and then all of a sudden you'll be talking about how it relates to some linear stuff, and you'll get like blank stares. Like, I don't remember that stuff because it was a couple of years ago, and we ran through it in 3 or 4 weeks as a 10th grader. I just think that's not necessarily great. So I don't know. That's my belief, and it was nice to see the stats in that first article to just back that up. That those visuals caught my eyes, at least.
Yeah, you mentioned, I think an important part is if students don't have that foundational algebra skill set, they're not going to be successful in calc or stats when they get to college, because those are skills that are so important, as you know, going through. You might have had classmates that just couldn't get down the calc because they didn't have the algebra skills. And if they can really make sure that they have those well, it helps a great deal in further math courses.
And something that Amy mentioned was in the article too, was about having somebody come back and discuss it. And calculus 2 is when I hit my first wall, and I even questioned, do I want to continue math? Do I want to continue studying math? So I was able to go back and share that with the high schoolers at where I graduated from in high school, and just how, like, you guys need to not just be going through the steps and getting the grades. You need to be asking the whys, because that is so important. And I think a lot of students, they can get through algebra because they can follow the mechanical process. They can do all the steps in the order. Sometimes they can check their answer. That's great. But a lot of the times when they get to calculus, you can't really do that as much anymore. And you need to be able to have that algebraic flow to go forwards and backwards in a problem, and hit dead ends and be okay with that, and then come back and try another route. I don't think that gets built into a lot of students when they're rushed through courses.
No, I agree. I think it's a lot of just get the right answer. Who cares? Get the right answer. Who cares? Instead of how do you proceed after you hit a wall? What do you do?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Perseverance, I think. But.
Yeah.
Yep, 100%. I agree.
I just started jotting some things down as we were talking. Do you guys have anything else to add? I put down a strong algebra foundation is a must, and have a student come back to discuss how well they were prepared for college and ways for them to have greater success in class. I guess I could put down.
I think it's huge, because I think every teacher always says, you guys need to know this for next year. And they just hear that so much that a lot of students write that off.
Yeah, from us, it means nothing. Yeah.
I actually went to the MCTM conference in Duluth one year, and I think I was a second-year teacher, and I was asked to sit in on a panel of new teachers, and we were asked by student teachers, like, how well were you prepared, and things like that. And there were a few of us that went to college together. We got done, and we had people come up and go, "Do you like teaching?" And because they said most of what you said was negative, and we said, no, we didn't want it to come off that way. We were just like, we wish they would have said this.
Yeah.
That you do all these lesson plans and they're great, but you throw them out the window 2 seconds into your lesson. But anything else you guys need to add or want to? I did
a couple
like
of reminders on the bottom too, Chad. If you're creating the assessment that you would allow the use of technology, you can put a link. If
Yep.
it's a Google Doc or if it's a PDF, you can end up putting it into your Group 6 folder. That's something that if you can create something that's usable, do so. So for those that are teaching college in the schools, create something that you think is a good example. And that aren't at that level, I challenge you to create just a short assessment to see what kind of questions would you ask a college algebra class in terms of preparing them for the expectations of what they would face in a college setting.
Mhm.
And then for groups, I don't know if you've had a chance to check, but for Module 6, between now and March 5th, I've got a couple of readings and new groups in which Tanner's moving to Algebra 1, and he gets to host that first group. And then I have Amy and Chad in 2 different Algebra 2 groups, and then Holly's in a pre-calc group.
Okay, so I'll have to check out those new groups.
I saw that we were all leaving, so I was
I
gonna.
know.
We should all say goodbye at the end.
That's right.
Yeah.
I got
Farewell.
worried. I thought I was left out of a group, but I was way at the end of one. But
Oh,
See, let's do that.
Yeah, since you just did the technology, I put you near the end, but I thought Tanner needs to end up getting back to hosting, so
I haven't hosted yet.
that's
so.
right. And Holly started out hosting, so I wasn't going to put her in charge of the first time.
Aw, thanks.
actually, I got frustrated about the whole time thing for the hosting. Other than that, it was pretty simple doing it this way.
yeah. I do like this. I do like it this way.
Pretty slick.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Oh, I've used Google Hangouts once or twice too in another class. Did you teach, Professor Arms, did you teach a technology class?
Yep.
I think that's where we had to do it.
Yep.
Okay. That worked out pretty well too. So
Perfect. All
Well-
right, well, good luck. Good luck with the next groups.
yeah.
So that next meeting's in the next. We have to have it by March 5th.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So,
Well, it was good to
All
get to
right.
know you guys.
yeah, you guys too.
And
Nice
then
to see your faces.
after I stop recording, is there a link that I can copy to post?
It'll end up downloading to your laptop or computer, and then follow the directions in terms of uploading that.
Okay.
folder.
Okay.
When I did it the last time, it took about 30 minutes to download it all and get it all set up. So
Okay.
just let it sit and spin and check on it in a little while.
Yeah, I'll try to get that up as soon as possible, and hopefully all goes well. So
All right, sounds good. Have a good night, everyone.
you too.
Good night.
Take care, guys.
Bye.